In the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, when the traitors had been cast down and the War Master slain, the Imperium faced a reckoning. No longer would any one man be permitted to wield command over an entire Space Marine Legion. To safeguard against such concentrated power ever again turning upon the Imperium, the Loyalist legions were broken apart. A new order was born from this, what came to be known as the Second Founding. The Primarch Rogel Dorn accepted this painful truth. Though his heart ached at the thought of breaking apart the proud brotherhood of the Imperial Fists, he bowed to the will of his fellow Primarchs. From his legion, new chapters were formed, each with their own names, heraldry, and future. Yet, Dorn ensured that each successor chapter received a relic of purpose, a symbol of unity, a gift from his own hand. To the chapter known as the Soul Drinkers, believed to have formed from the personal guard of 1st Captain Sigismund and fleet-based strike units of the 7th Legion, he granted a mighty weapon, the Soul Spear. Forged in the Age of Legend, the Soul Spear was a vortex relic, once used by Dorn to slay warp beasts and claim worlds in the Emperor's name. It became a sacred icon, proof that the Soul Drinkers, though now apart, were still bound by the spirit of their lineage. Centuries passed. In the twilight years of the 36th millennium, the Imperium was shaken by the rain of blood. The violent and faith-fueled madness of High Lord Goj Vandire. The age of apostasy had begun. In 378 M36, High Marshal Siginandus of the Black Templars declared a crusade to liberate Holy Terra. Alongside the Imperial Fists, the Soul Drinkers, the fervent Firehawks, and elements of the Martian Tech Guard, they marched upon Vandire's ecclesiarchal palace. What followed was known as the Wars of Apostasy, a crusade that would end with Vandire's death at the hands of one of his own former protectors, Alicia Dominica, founder of the Adepta Sororitas. During this era, the Soul Drinkers achieved many victories, some on Terra, others on far-flung worlds where Xenos forces such as the Eldari were met and repelled. But even glory can become a snare. For over 1,000 years, the Soul Spear had been lost, vanished with the chapter's flagship, the Sanctifier, during a warp jump. At long last, it resurfaced, not in a place of honor, but among the trinkets of a wealthy fool who had no idea of its true worth. The Soul Drinkers vowed to recover their relic, but that oath brought them into conflict with other Imperial factions, chief among them the Adeptus Mechanicus. Ostensibly aiding the ecclesiarchy, the Mechanicus in truth sought to take the Soul Spear for study and replication. Confrontation culminated in the destruction of the Mechanicus star fort, Laconia. Several Adeptus Ministorum and Mechanicus vessels were also damaged in the aftermath. pursued and harried, the Soul Drinkers retreated into a nearby asteroid field, where they were besieged until Chapter Master Gorgalion arrived via a route long thought sealed. Reinforcements had come. Gorgalion brought news. The Inquisition had offered peace at a cost. The Space Marines who had taken part in the Laconia assault were to be sacrificed in exchange for absolution. Gorgalion refused. Only a Soul Drinker could judge another Soul Drinker. He demanded that Captain Sarpedon submit to a ritual duel, the Shield Rites, a test of righteousness sealed in blood. During the combat, a strange force took hold of Sarpedon. Mutation twisted his form. 8 arachnoid limbs burst from his body, granting him the edge he needed. Gorgalion fell. The cause of Sarpedon's mutation would later become known: the insidious influence of Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways. Sarpedon assumed command, though some in the chapter resisted. The majority accepted his leadership. Even faced with corruption and new mutations manifesting in Space Marines within the chapter, the Soul Drinkers refused to forsake their loyalty to the Emperor. They had turned from the Imperium, but not from him. The apothecary Palas discovered a way to halt the mutations, with information recovered from the planetoid Stratix Luminae. But the price for this information was steep. Sergeant Telos and his assault marines were left behind on the planet, and in desperation, they fell fully to chaos. But the Soul Drinkers would clash with the traitorous Telos again, on a world where both the Crimson Fists and the sadistic Drakari had also come to hunt him. Sarpedon dueled his former brother and left him for dead. But it was not the Soul Drinkers who ended Telos. The Inquisition destroyed the world he had claimed, erasing him at last. But peace did not follow. Within the chapter, a scout marine named Eumenes rose to power and challenged Sarpedon's rule. As they battled one another, the Howling Griffins prepared to strike, believing the Soul Drinkers had become the Black Chalice, a chaos force in disguise. Sarpedon defeated Eumenes. Upon his victory, Sarpedon addressed his brothers, offering the mantle of leadership to any of them, but none stepped forward. So he remained chapter master, even as some among the younger Soul Drinkers chose to depart, seeking a different path. As the Soul Drinkers fled from the relentless pursuit of an Adeptus Mechanicus task force, their ancient space hulk groaned under the strain of dwindling fuel. Pushed far from known space, they ventured deep into the mysterious veiled regions of the galaxy, seeking fuel, refuge, and time. There, among dead stars and long-forgotten systems, they found signs of human life, and of a presence more dreadful still. The Necrons had awoken in this region. These undying machines had already scoured world after world, erasing all life from planets that once knew the voice of man. On one such world, still clinging to fragile life, the soul drinkers found the final embers of humanity flickering. The deal was struck. The humans would be granted safe passage to their ships. In return, the soul drinkers would stand against the Necrons, holding the line until escape could be made, and in exchange, the Astartes would take the fuel they so desperately needed. They stood their ground with the ferocity of warriors who had little else left to lose. And as civilians raced to the spaceport, the Necron tide rose to meet them, salvation hovering just out of reach. The Necron fleet entered the system, sealing the trap, and soon after, the Adeptus Mechanicus arrived. Old foes, now entangled in a new and grimmer confrontation. Mechanicus and Necron fleets clashed above, fire blooming in the void. But the outcome was grimly clear. The Mechanicus would fall, the Necrons would endure. So, Sarpedon, ever the pragmatist, offered an alliance, a ceasefire with old rivals, in hopes of defeating a mutual and more ancient enemy. The Mechanicus accepted. Together, they would strike at the heart of the threat. Celica, the Necron crown world. Mechanicus' ship fell like a meteor on Celica's atmosphere, disgorging its armies beside the soul drinkers. Blood flowed in rivers upon the gray and alien sands, but at last they reached the tomb of the Necron Lord. Sarpedon met it in single combat, striking the beast down, only for it to rise once more, as is the way of such timeless monsters. As it crushed Sarpedon in its grip, it was the sacrifice of Techmarine Ligus, his life for his chapter, that ended the Lord and silenced its cold fury. They had won, but there was no triumph to be found. At the designated evacuation point, there were no Mechanicus transports waiting, only the thunder of Imperial Fist gunships. First Captain Darnath Lysander himself descended in Terminator armor, his warriors surrounding the wounded soul drinkers. They had not come to praise, but to pass judgment. Lysander demanded surrender. Sarpedon, bloodied but unbowed, invoked the right of challenge, a duel. The fight was swift. Sarpedon, drained from the battles before, could not match the strength of the Imperial Fist's first captain, and was swiftly defeated. And so Sarpedon, true to his word, ordered his chapter to lay down their arms. Taken in chains aboard the Phalanx, the colossal fortress monastery of the Imperial Fists, the soul drinkers were delivered to the heart of their lineage and to judgment. Few accused of heresy ever face trial. Fewer still are given honor. But the Imperial Fists are not like other chapters. They remembered the soul drinkers as brothers. And to brothers, they offered formality, dignity, and a chance, however small, at redemption. Each measure of the trial was carried out with unwavering precision. Every rite, every procedure honored. For if the soul drinkers were to fall, none could say it was without fairness. Among the evidence gathered against them was a tome, taken from one of Chaplain Ictinos' flock, the Catechism Martial. Confiscated alongside his power armor, the book's ancient binding hid truths long thought lost or buried. These Marines, those who had followed Ictinos when other officers had fallen, had come to see the chaplain as their anchor, their shield. But within the catechism lay secrets too heavy to carry. And in the light of the Phalanx's halls, those secrets would finally be revealed. Interrogations followed. Brother Kaon, one of Ictinos' flock, was brought before Lord Castellan Lucrantis. Under careful questioning, truth spilled like oil across a sacred floor. It was revealed that Danathos, the revered philosopher-soldier, the one who had penned the catechism itself, still lived. He had survived in silence, hidden for 6,000 Terran years, inside a dreadnought's adamantium tomb of the very world of Celica. Ingenious traps guarded the crypt, ensuring only an Astartes could ever reach it. And when it was at last discovered, Danathos came forth willingly to stand beside his chapter and before the blade of judgment. A conclave of chapters assembled, voices from the Crimson Fists, Howling Griffins, Iron Knights, outsiders too, Doom Eagles, Silver Skulls, Angels Sanguine. The Adeptus Sororitas stood watch. The Inquisition listened in silence, and the tech priests recorded every word, their minds turning like gears behind the mask. Prosecuting the soul drinkers was Brother Reynes, once captain of the Crimson Fist's second company, now a penitent warrior who had walked the galaxy seeking death. Dishonored by the soul drinkers on Endymion 4, he vowed to regain his honor by bringing their tale to light. He stood tall, his voice cold. The soul drinkers, he said, had been corrupt for millennia. Puppets to Danathos, servants of chaos. More revelations followed. From the angels sanguine came a shattering truth. They had studied the gene seed of a captured soul drinker. Its lineage could not be traced to Rogel Dorn. Then came movements in the shadows. Pilgrims from the Order of the Blinded Eye, manipulated by Danathos, broke the soul drinkers' bonds. The warriors made their final stand in the Phalanx's librarium, bolters raised, hearts defiant. A battle followed, a storm of gunfire in ancient halls. But this was only the beginning, a distraction. Elsewhere, Danathos' final move was already underway. The battle in the librarium was never meant to end in victory. It was a misdirection. One final veil behind which Danathos set the last piece of his ancient plan into motion. Far from the firefight, Chaplain Ictenos moved with purpose, his devotion not to the Emperor, but to the philosopher-soldier who had foreseen all. His prey was Captain Nkalo of the Iron Knights. The chaplain abducted him in silence and delivered him to Denathos. With Nkalo's blood, Denathos unlocked a secret few even knew existed. The Predator's Eye, a warp gate sealed 10,000 years ago by Rogel Dorn himself. Dorn could not destroy it, so he buried it, hidden in the very bones of the phalanx, where it had slumbered ever since. Now, with the seal broken, the warp tore open, and from it came the Howling. Abraxas, a demon prince of Tzeentch, emerged in fire and madness. A being of ancient spite and infinite cunning. He was the final instrument in Denathos' long symphony. With the phalanx as his chariot, Abraxas would lead the legions of chaos through the stars. To Denathos, the Imperium was beyond saving. Only fire could temper its soul. Through agony, through war and collapse, he would rebuild it. Stronger, wiser, with himself as its new master. But Sarpedon still lived. Escaping captivity, he gathered what few battle brothers remained, leaving them behind to fight and fall in the halls of the librarium. He sought the truth, but he was ambushed. Ictenos' flock struck with deadly precision. His squad mates were slain. Sarpedon, enraged, cut them down one by one until only Ictenos remained. The duel was brutal. Wounded, nearly broken, Sarpedon triumphed and unleashed his psychic gift, the Hell. He tore through Ictenos' mind like a burning blade, unearthing everything Denathos had kept hidden. Plans within plans, manipulations that spanned millennia. Sarpedon had never been free, not truly. He had always been Denathos' instrument. He cast Ictenos into the void, broken and ruined, and made his way to the bridge of the phalanx. There, the corrupted dreadnought awaited. The two clashed, steel against psyker, past against present. Sarpedon was grievously wounded. Missiles tore his flesh, and the power fist of Denathos lifted him from the ground, ready to crush the last of the soul drinkers. But in that moment, Sarpedon acted. From his belt, he drew the soul spear, the ancient vortex weapon, his chapter's relic. With the last of his strength, he drove the twin blades through the dreadnought's core. The sarcophagus cracked. The power fist fell slack. Denathos, once philosopher, now heretic, was exposed. Sarpedon reached inside and tore him free. Meanwhile, Captain Luco, Sergeant Gravis, and Librarian Varnica, battle sister of the Sororitas, and a small squad of Imperial fists raced toward the Predator's Eye. One last hope to end the madness. They fought through the demonic host. Many fell, and in the final chamber they faced Abraxas. By blade and flame and holy wrath, they cast the demon prince back into the warp and sealed the gate. Predator's eyes shut. Without its anchor, the demon shrieked. Their forms collapsed. The phalanx echoed with the thunder of bolters as the Imperial fists swept through, purging what remained. Only Librarian Varnica, Sister Ascarion, and 2 soul drinkers survived the assault to close the warp gate. When First Captain Lysander arrived to take them into custody, the 2 soul drinkers made a final choice. They carried the mortally wounded Gravis to the closing portal, just as it shimmered and flickered, stepping into the warp, knowing that there was no longer any place left for them in the galaxy. Back on the phalanx, Sarpedon emerged, carrying Danathos' feeble, withered form. Before Chapter Master Vladimir Pugh, he laid bare the truth. It had been Danathos, not Chaos, who damned the soul drinkers. It had been his pride, his scheme, his ambition. And now it was time to pay. Sarpedon turned to the Predator's eye. With the Philosopher Soldier screaming in fear, he stepped forward, dragging Danathos with him. The portal swallowed them both, and then closed forever. The phalanx was saved. The threat ended. And on solemn columns with the Apothecarian, 2 lists were carved into stone. One bore the names of the Imperial fists who died in defense of their home. The other bore the names of the soul drinkers, brothers in death. Their chapter was gone, but not their legacy. For in the long dark of the far future, their story endures. A caution to all who fail to see the creeping hand of chaos, waiting, always, in the shadow. In the shadowed wake of the galaxy's most cataclysmic events, after Cadia's fall and the cruel birth of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the soul of the Imperium reeled. Warp storms split reality, and the veil between the material and the immaterium thinned into a jagged wound. It was during this dark and tumultuous time, in the dawn of the era Indomitus, that the soul drinkers returned. By order of the resurrected Primarch Rabute Gilliman, a new chapter was formed. Born entirely of Primaris stock, they carried the name of a force once famed and later forgotten, the Soul Drinkers Reborn. These warriors knew little of the darkness that had stained their forebears. The High Lords of Terra had seen to that, issuing an edict of obliteration to wipe away every trace of the original chapter's existence. Their legacy, a tale of rebellion, mutation, and misguided loyalty, was shrouded in silence. And so, the Primaris Soul Drinkers believed themselves to be heirs of honor and glory. Eager to prove their worth, the new chapter fought with fervent zeal. Among their earliest trials was the Caprian Reclamation, a campaigned to liberate the sacred world of Kepris. Chaos cults led by the arch-heretic Yekwath, the so-called voice of all, had defiled the planet and the relics of the ecclesiarchy that rested there. It was Captain Kuya and his third company who answered the call, turning the tide of battle and delivering a much-needed victory for the Imperium. But such triumph drew unwanted attention. The Inquisition, ever watchful, questioned the Soul Drinkers' methods and unearthed their past. The truth came to light. Soul Drinkers were not paragons, but heirs to heresy. The original chapter had been declared traitors, their name expunged, their memory burned. The revelation shook the Primaris Soul Drinkers to their core. These warriors, bred for loyalty, now bore the name of Renegades. Confusion gave way to a crisis of identity. What did it mean to fight for a cause so tainted? To wear the sigil of a chapter once condemned? Still, they endured. And though uncertainty shadowed every step, the reborn Soul Drinkers continued to serve, determined to carve a new path through a galaxy unraveling in fire and faith. In structure, the Soul Drinkers followed the tenets of the Codex Astartes, but loosely, with certain traditions unique to them. Like the Blood Angels, they favored shock assault tactics. Their methods were swift, direct, and merciless. Yet, unlike many chapters, their neophytes were not cast into the battlefield as scouts. Instead, they learned by serving their elders, witnessing war, tending armor, and chronicling the deeds of their masters in ancient chansons, inscribed on humble data slates. Every record was archived for future generations, preserving the legacy of the chapter, one battle at a time. But their path was not one of steady growth. After their fall from Imperial grace, the Soul Drinkers suffered grievous losses. Following the First Chapter War and the battle for Vemeth, they numbered only 700 Astartes. Stratix Luminae saw them reduced to 450. Endymion IV and the Second Chapter War carved that number down further to 300. Then came the Exodus. Eumenes and his followers broke away, leaving the chapter with a mere 250 warriors. And by the time they clashed with the Necrons in the Veiled regions, fewer than 100 Soul Drinkers remained. Captured aboard the Phalanx, they faced extinction. And when Danathos revealed his treachery, when Demon Prince Abraxas tore into reality, the final warriors of the old chapter died, not in shame, but in honor, defending their enemies from a threat greater still. In the end, only 4 firstborn were known to survive: Danathos, Sarpedon, Leuco, and Gravis. These last sons of the old chapter passed into the warp through a closing portal, leaving behind only mystery. And with the rebirth of the Soul Drinkers during the Era Indomitus, their new Primaris incarnation would follow Guilliman's revised Codex Astartes. But echoes of the past remained, quiet and waiting. In battle, the Soul Drinkers embraced swiftness, precision, and overwhelming force. Their tactics were inherited from the ship-to-ship specialists of the Imperial Fist's Legion. Shock assaults, boarding operations, and drop pod insertions became their hallmarks. Their combat doctrine was shaped by a tome, the Catechisms Martial, written by the legendary Danathos. Every Soul Drinker carried a copy, and within its pages lay the soul of their war philosophy. Their doctrine was not to endure, but to strike, to crush enemy lines before they could dig in. Where others favored drawn-out conflicts and dug-in sieges, the Soul Drinkers chose movement, fire, and fury. Though it was later revealed that their gene seed did not stem from Rogel Dorn as believed, the lessons they followed endured. They had become masters of void war and mobile combat, regardless of their true lineage. But it was the origin of their gene seed that brought the greatest unease. During the trial aboard the Phalanx, Commander Gethsemar of the Angel Sanguine presented troubling evidence. His chapter's sanguinary priests had harvested gene seed from captured Soul Drinkers, hoping to understand if corruption had tainted their blood. What they found was startling. The Soul Drinkers did not descend from Rogel Dorn. Their heritage could not be traced to any known Primarch. The chapter's name, it seemed, had its roots not in honor, but mutation. An early change in the omophagia, the organ that allowed Astartes to experience a creature's memories by consuming its flesh. Through their unique ceremony of the chalice, the Soul Drinkers did more than recall memories. They felt the creature's soul, its pain, its joy, its fear. They drank the very essence of being. Metaphysically speaking, the Soul Drinkers did not merely remember their enemies. They became them, if only for a moment. It is a grim irony, perhaps, that those who drank souls would come to question their own. And though the new chapter fights on, Primaris warriors with the name of traitors, they carry a heavy burden, one not easily cast aside. They walk in the shadow of a fallen legacy, yet strive still to forge a path worthy of the Emperor's light.